Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. The 14th Amendment. You've probably been hearing about this in the news, but you might have wondered whether or not A, this is relevant for today's modern America, and B, if the amendment really was intended to justify everyone and anyone coming here, delivering a child here, and then being able to wholesale bring all of their family here. Was this the original intent of the 14th Amendment? And how does it apply today for our realities? Let's get started. So what was the 14th Amendment originally designed to do? This was not one of the amendments that was existent at the time of the founding of this country. No, this actually came later. This came years later, and it was designed to address a Supreme Court decision, the Dred Scott case. So after the Lincoln administration invaded the South and the Federals subjugated the South, one of the things that they did in order to bring about a whole new era of reality for people living in the United States was to pass several bills and to install certain programs known as the Reconstruction era. So one of the consequences of this was that the entire population was having to be restructured from the ground up in the way in which it interacted with itself. One of the realities for several people who were formerly slaves was that they weren't able to actualize their civil rights in many cases. And so, in order to combat this issue, the federal government began and then ultimately passed this amendment, the 14th Amendment, which established that if you were born in the United States, regardless of whether or not you were slave or free, that you were a citizen of the United States, you had the ability to, for instance, vote. You had the right to own property. All of these things came as a result of the new reality that former slaves were experiencing. But their ability to access those rights that they were now guaranteed under the Constitution was limited in many ways. And so the 14th Amendment really was an attempt to address that grievance. So the 14th Amendment ultimately was passed so that former slaves were able to lawfully actualize themselves as full citizens of the United States and that they were not barred from their rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Property, ownership of property was a huge part of that as well. So the 14th Amendment was focused on including people here in the United States who had been born here, in many cases who had family here for 200 years prior, and who were now in the newly organized United States being denied their civil rights on the basis of their former slave status. One of the reasons why the 14th Amendment was amended to the Constitution was that the Dred Scott case, the decision that had come down about 10 years earlier from the Supreme Court, effectively said that slaves and former slaves are not citizens. And so it turned that around to force from the federal level everyone to comply with the reality that regardless of whether or not you were born slave or free in the new United States, everyone had access to their civil rights. So the contrast now in modern America is a quite stark one, and that is that many people, particularly on the left, are using the 14th Amendment to justify the wholesale invasion of the United States. And when I say the wholesale invasion of the United States, we've got some numbers to back up that statement and to substantiate this position. So the ultimate question is, does the 14th Amendment provide the legal justification for the wholesale invasion of the United States? Many people on the left are using the 14th Amendment to justify their position, saying that anyone and everyone who comes into the United States, regardless of whether or not they did this the proper and legal way in accordance with our laws, if they birth a child here, that child is automatically a citizen. And as a consequence to that, via our immigration laws, if that child is a citizen, then their direct family members, by default, are now grandfathered in to having a cushy place here with us in the United States. One of the other things that's not commonly understood is that these children, by the way, as American citizens, born in the route that they currently are qualified to receive lots of different welfare services. That comes at a cost, the taxpayer dollar. And this is not what many people would have you believe, a minor issue. This is a major issue. When you look at the numbers don't lie. So just how big is this current problem from a numerical standpoint of illegal immigration? And can we say that it is a true invasion of the United States? According to the Pew Research Center, which, depending on what you believe of them, some people would consider to be a responsible resource, The Pew Research Center, as of 2021, estimated that 11 million illegal immigrants were currently residing in the United States. That does not count children born to them. No, this is 11 million illegals living in the United States as of 2021. But wait, there's more. Under the Biden administration, from 2021 forward, there are approximately 10 million contacts, illegal border crossings that came in 2021 forward. So some of these got away. We're not exactly sure. Numbers are quite sketchy, particularly when you look at who's doing the reporting. But suffice it to say that conservatively, there are between 19, probably upwards of 20 to 21 illegal immigrants currently in the United States. When you factor in the children that they have birthed illegally since they've been here, this number becomes quite staggering. There have been between 5 to 6 million children born here in the United States to illegal aliens. When you look at the total of this number of people that have come in here to the United States, you have 11 million, which is the current estimate from 2021 of illegal immigrants in the United States, plus 10 million new border crossings since January of 2021, which apparently this number does include the apprehensions and gotaways, but I think it's very safe to say that it's between 9 and 11 million. If we go with the 10 million number, 11 million current illegals, plus the 10 million new contacts, plus the 6 million children born to illegals, that is 27 million people who are here illegally. Now, still, this is somewhat of an abstract issue. People see numbers and they think, okay, well, whatever. There are people behind these numbers. Yes, there are. So let's put it into perspective from other groups of people who were made up of large numbers. I want you to consider something. Let's harken back to World War II. The combined total here from the German army in World War II is 18.2 million, approximately 13 million from their army, 1 million from the Navy, 3 million from the Air Force, and the Waffen-SS were 900,000. When you look at the Japanese Imperial Army in World War II, their combined total forces was approximately 6.1 million. With the Italians, it was 4.5 million. So when you look at the combined manpower of the Axis, which we fought in World War II, 28.8 million people. So now let's harken back to the 10 to 11 million illegals that have come here since the Biden administration, and then the 11 million or so that were here before 2021, according to the Pew Research Center, it was 11 million. And then you add in the 6 million children that were born here in the United States. You are talking a total of 27 million people here. The combined armed forces total that we fought in World War II was 28.8 million. When you put into perspective what this is, we have been invaded by the manpower of the Axis in World War II. The 14th Amendment was never designed to subsidize our invasion. Oh, but they're mostly peaceful, Patriot Nurse. How could you possibly say that? Are they? Let's look at some more numbers here. There are different groups of statistics that you can analyze, and many of them are going to have their own bias to try and skew the data downward or to increase it. But the Center for Immigration Studies has placed the estimated number of murders committed by illegal aliens here in the United States to be approximately 4,000 to 5,000 people murdered here in the United States between the years 2008 and 2018. That does not take into consideration the 10 million plus people who have contacted our borders and come in here since the Biden administration 2021 and forward. So we're looking at significantly higher numbers of people. 4,000 to 6,000 people murdered here in the United States. So conservatively, we're going to hold at the 6,000 number. This is as low as it's going to get here. To put faces on this, the deaths at Pearl Harbor in the United States were 2,403 Americans, and the deaths on September 11th were 2,977 Americans. So illegal aliens have killed in the United States more people than the sum total of Pearl Harbor and September 11th combined. This is an invasion. And the question is, do we look at the Constitution and do we look at these amendments as functionally broken or as functionally misread and misapplied? I don't think that you can view the Constitution's 14th Amendment, originally designed to ensure the civil rights of former slaves in the United States that cannot be construed to subsidize an invasion of the United States and the murder of our citizens. And this is one of the reasons why the Trump administration's move from a federal level to empower ICE and other law enforcement agencies to deport these people. This is why it's so popular, because people do see that the system is broken. Now, the question is, what do we do moving forward from it? The Supreme Court can reinterpret fundamental passages of the 14th Amendment, or the 14th Amendment can be altered and also can be abolished and a new amendment put in its place. Oh, Patriot Nurse, that can never happen. Tell me how real prohibition is in your life today. Prohibition was indeed an amendment to the Constitution, and it was struck out and undone. So the 14th Amendment can be overhauled, it can be amended in such a way, or it can be reinterpreted to its proper context, which is not to bring everybody and their brother in here and have all of their progeny subsidized on the taxpayer dime and have rapists and criminals carte blanche access to the United States because they father a child here or they birth a child here. The 14th Amendment now is going to be the reality that we live in until it has fundamentally been reinterpreted to its proper context. So what are some key points here for reform in this area? Well, one of the questions is, what is the real, true, proper interpretation of subject to the jurisdiction thereof? It certainly doesn't mean that everyone who comes in here is going to have access to all of our free programs and services that we are paying for. Of course, the taxpayers are, just because they birth a child here. That's obviously not what it means. So what does it mean? We're a nation of immigrants, some people might say. We are a nation of law first, not a free-for-all. That would be called chaos and anarchy, and that's not what we are. Government is indeed a sliding scale of evil, but a republic such as what we have does the best amount of good with the least amount of evil. And so when people have come here in the United States, they came here legally. And also, I would add, at the times that many people were coming here in the United States prior to the welfare state, they weren't getting services. They weren't getting to have 6, 8, 10 children for free. They weren't getting subsidized rent. They weren't getting cash handed to them. They came and they worked, but they got nothing handed to them when they got here. As far as what the rest of the world does, I can tell you that there are very few places that actually have jus soli, like birth by landing on the soil, effectively. Panama is one of them. Brazil is another. There are some other places, but the majority of these places are in the New World. When you look at Europe and you look at several places around the world, particularly places that are rich in capital, like Switzerland, for instance, Liechtenstein, these are places that lots of people want to be, and not a lot of people are allowed to immigrate to. For instance, when you look at Monaco, the casino and Hotel Monte Carlo, everybody and their brother wants to live in Monaco. Their tax structure is wonderful. There are yachts that line the harbor there. Monaco doesn't have citizenship by birth. No rich country has citizenship by birth. And why is that? Because they realize that everybody wants to exploit it. So some options that other countries have investigated and ultimately have implemented are citizenship by parentage, which effectively means that if your parents are lawful citizens, then you are a citizen, but not if you are a visitor and not if you are an illegal. When we look at the precedent for amending amendments to the Constitution, there are several. So when you look at Prohibition, which was the 18th Amendment, ultimately it was struck down and functionally repealed by a subsequent amendment, which was the 21st Amendment. So the 18th Amendment Prohibition ultimately was placed into the Constitution, and people decided, we don't like everybody and their brother telling us we're not allowed to drink, and taking people off to jail, and a whole bunch of other corruption that ensued, government corruption that ensued, and also the mafia. So the 18th Amendment was later nullified effectively by the 21st Amendment. So there are precedents for fixing things. The Constitution has a method and a protocol for fixing things. So a key take home from this video, friends, is that the 14th Amendment originally had the purpose of safeguarding the civil rights and the liberty of former slaves in the United States. It has now been twisted and maligned and forced like a square peg into a round hole to subsidize the invasion of our country. And there is a way to fix this. The Supreme Court could reinterpret the key passages, for instance, the subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Also, there could be the constitutional amendment process. However, the Supreme Court legitimately reinterpreting this, I think, is probably one of the most likely scenarios at this point. Let me know, what do you think? But we cannot ignore the reality of this equation on the ground. When you consider that we have allowed to invade our country almost the same number of people as comprised the Axis military power in World War II, that is staggering. That is staggering. 27 to 28 million people in the United States who do not need to be here, who came here and have abused our systems. And now the left, the socialists and the Marxists among us, they're trying to justify their presence here. And they want you to feel bad when they're deported. You know who I feel bad for? I feel bad for the family members who've had to suffer for the loss of their children, God forbid, because these people came in here and murdered them or trafficked them away or got them so hooked on various different drugs that they ultimately overdosed. That's who I feel bad for. I don't feel bad for anybody who came in here. The criminality rate of illegal immigrants is 100%. The first thing that they did as their entrance into this country and their introduction into their new home was to break our laws. There should be zero sympathy for them. And when it came right down to it, did we think that we should act with more empathy and more understanding towards the Imperial Japanese when they bombed Pearl Harbor, when they violated our territorial sovereignty, and when they murdered our people? Absolutely not. So friends, I hope this video gave you something to think about. If you did enjoy it, I hope you'll subscribe to me here and also share this with one person who you know would be benefited from it. So friends, we touched on a lot of things today. We talked about the original purpose of the 14th Amendment. We talked about its context, and we also gave some perspective here as to just how many people are coming into the United States illegally and who have invaded our country. We have effectively the manpower of the German army, the Imperial Japanese army, and the Italians inside our country right now. That's how big the scale of this is. So don't let anybody tell you that you should feel sympathy for people or feel sad when they're deported. Absolutely not. We have a foreign invasion force here in the United States, and the swift deportation and en masse removal, particularly of the criminal elements, this is necessary for our survival. Friends, I hope this video was helpful for y'all. I hope you have a blessed week, and I hope that you are taking these things seriously and sharing these videos in your groups, among your friends, and even with your senators, your congressmen, and your local state legislatures. This is an issue that we have got to deal with, or we are not going to have a country anymore. Have a great week, guys. May the Lord bless and keep you all. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.